Licensed killers are very important to Dead by Daylight. No matter where you stand on the topic, you can't deny that some of the most exciting moments in Dead by Daylight history are the ones where the community is shown a glimpse of a new horror icon making it into the game. Be it total shoo-ins, total curveballs, or total things in between. A licensed killer being added to the game is never a bad thing. No matter what, their gameplay tends to shake things up pretty hard. That said, I remember there being a time where people were getting genuine fatigue from all the licensed killers being added one after another. At least back in the day. People love the wholesale original killers, including me, and back when behavior was under different leadership, it was hard to know if we were ever going to get an in-house homemade killer again. Especially not when the pig was introduced. I gotta tell ya, all the people I knew who played this game at the time were absolutely not excited about Amanda from the fucking Saw franchise being added. I was definitely skeptical too, but not because I dislike the Saw movies. No, on the contrary. I was skeptical because I was sure that Dead by Daylight wouldn't do the Saw movies justice. I am so happy to say I was wrong, and Pig might be one of the most genuine love letter to the source material killers this game has ever gotten. We got Myers, we got Bubba, we got Freddy. The big four minus Jason were in the game. And now we at Behavior introduce the twist villain from Saw 2. Listen, as an outright fan of Saw, Amanda doing her pig-faced assassin shtick is probably the best option they could have gone with as far as a killer from this franchise goes. But like, stepping back, if you hadn't ever heard of Saw, would you even know who this is? Amanda is plenty of things, but iconic is not one of them. Billy the Puppet is iconic, but you can't just put Billy in the game, he's inanimate. And putting Jigsaw himself wouldn't work because the dude has been dead for 7 movies out of 10. And heck, even if it was someone like Jigsaw, would that mean anything to anyone who wasn't like super into these films? What I'm trying to say is that putting a Saw killer in this game was a hell of a prospect, but like, I can't kid you at all, I think the pig rules. On the mechanics versus vibes scale, she's sorta closer to Myers than Freddy. She's built to make you play and act like the jump scare lady from Saw. I will not have to do quantum physics to understand her like I did with Myers, but just keep that in mind. This is one of the more playing the role killers. Which is weird to say because she has some pretty wild and specific mechanics. Let's start with her more active ability, crouching and ambushing. At any point in the match, you can hit your ability key and go low profile. This will take a second, but once you get down, you will be given undetectable at the cost of slowing you down a little bit. The slowdown isn't a crazy amount like it used to be, but generally you don't want to be just sliding around the map like this. It's better to walk around normally and only start crouching when you know survivors are nearby. Be it via aura reading or just having good ears. Don't get the wrong idea though, you only lose a few seconds crouching in this way, so use your own judgment. Your terror radius will only fully go away after 5 seconds of being undetectable, but that doesn't mean you should wait 5 seconds before going in on folks. This just means that during that 5 seconds your terror radius will slowly fade out. Most of the time, the common survivor is going to assume you're headed away from them. Worth specifying, going into this mode means you go undetectable, not completely invisible. It just makes you go small mode. Crouching makes your visible self much smaller, and allows you to use what would be set dressing in most maps as a genuine cover to hide your approach. Overall, pretty snazzy on-demand stealth. You can even press the button again to go out of crouch mode, and with a bit of patience you can hit people with a basic attack right out of stealth. But that's not the fun thing to do, because when you're crouching, you have access to performing an ambush. Ambush used to be not good. It was just bad. It was simply not a very usable ability. Like, it was bad to the point where if you saw a pig using ambush back in the day, you could assure yourself that they were probably new. I don't think it was an accurate judgment call at all, but what sadly mattered was that it was kind of the general consensus. That said, I think Ambush has become much, much better over time, and I think the majority of folks just don't realize what it can do. So the main draw of Ambush is the ability to go from super stealthy to extremely aggressive in less than a second. The moment you press the ambush key, you start rapidly charging up a bar for a huge dash, and okay, can I take a moment to talk about something for a second? This is my pick for favorite bit of fan service to the source material this game has ever had. So if you have seen the Saw films, and if you have, God bless your soul, I'm also of the damned, you might have seen this moment and made an observation. Was that a tiger sound? Every time a pig-masked person ambushes someone in these movies, it is accompanied by an insane animalistic roar that makes no sense at all. Like, where is it coming from? And in Dead by Daylight, when you start charging, you announce your presence with that same goddamn roar. That fucking rules. Sincerely, as a Saw film enjoyer, this makes me so happy. Anywho, roaring will, of course, give away your position and tends to frighten the shit out of survivors. If survivors try to keep a cool head though, they tend to know to start running away from whatever they were doing. And most of the time, that won't even save them. When it's ready, Ambush sends you running in whatever direction you were looking, brandishing your hidden blade. You're actually pretty damn fast in this state, a little faster than full sprint Bubba without add-ons. And the moment you make contact with a survivor, you slice them. In essence, Ambush is a deeply advanced and enhanced version of a lunge attack. Something every killer can do if they hold the attack key. It's usually used to eke out a bit more distance in a close chase or confirm a hit in a very tight loop. But when taken to this extreme, it becomes so much more of a serious threat. Sliding at nearly 7 meters a second for 2 seconds and change, with the ability to turn on a dime in any direction while dashing, turns you into a human tow missile if you catch survivors off guard. And for the most part, that is what you will be using this for. Catching people off guard. Ambush is fantastic for its namesake. Going from hidden to running like a madman in a second means that people will have very little time to react, so it is mostly used for sneak attacks. This leads to the assumption that Pig doesn't have anything to do in chase. Crouching is risky and slow, and ambushing is best on unaware targets, right? Why would you do that in a loop? Well, to hit survivors with it, silly. Yeah, Ambush is actually very good at cracking certain loops like eggshells, and there's a good reason why. You see, most sprint and lunge moves in this game interact with walls in some way. The general rule with most of these abilities is that if you hit a wall, you probably fucked up. With Ambush, you don't actually interact with walls at all while dashing unless you run out of dash or decide to swing early. You just kind of slide along them. And even if you do end up smacking a wall at the end of your charge, it's not going to stagger you for a significant amount of time at all. So what that means is that if you're in a tough loop, you can crouch, charge up, lunge, and hug the walls extremely hard to get someone. Heck, you can do wacky shit like slowing yourself on some geometry to make someone unsure as to where you'll be headed before continuing your big sprint without an obstruction. And even if you don't hit the survivor, you can resume chasing super fast after a miss, meaning you're gonna be on someone like glue if you know how to use your ambushes in a chase. Granted, this is still probably the most finicky ability in the game to use this way. It takes some time, and when you fuck it up, it just kind of leaves you at square one with someone on their way to safety. Sometimes it's better to just play the long game and wait for bloodlust to kick in. But like, I don't know, I think Ambush is super undervalued right now for no real good reason. It's a big slippery lunge. And lunging for an absurd amount of time is surprisingly good. And it is simply the potatoes to the meat of Pig's kit. Being an ambush-based stealth character is just the icing on the rusty, blood-soaked cake. It's the means to your true ends as the Pig, which is to turn the game on its head entirely. When a survivor is downed at all, you can mosey on over and slip one of your 4 reverse bear traps on him. God, that little click noise has no business being so satisfying. When a trap is on a survivor, it lays dormant for a while, but the moment that a generator gets completed, all inactive traps on survivors turn on, and the countdown begins. As long as the survivor isn't downed, hooked, or in a chase, the timer is going to be ticking. And after 2.5 minutes, if the survivor doesn't do anything about it, they will fucking die. No bones about it. The reverse bear trap just straight up murders you. 2.5 minutes might sound like plenty of time to deal with this, but when the stakes are sudden death, survivors will feel every single second of that countdown. And it doesn't help that getting rid of the trap is extremely time consuming. Around the map are a set of jigsaw boxes that survivors can see the auras of when they have a trap on. And when a survivor has a deadly hat, it's usually in their best interest to set off on a quest to get the damn thing off. Searching a box takes 12 seconds, and every second has a good chance of throwing a somewhat nasty skill check in your face, of which will stun a survivor for a moment and cause a loud noise indicator, resetting progress on said box. If you, as a survivor, find the wrong box, it will become inaccessible to you, make a loud laughing noise, and its aura will be hidden, basically making it so that you aren't going to accidentally sprint to a disabled box a second time. You don't have to search a specific box to find your key, but you do have to search through 1 to 4 boxes to get your trap off. You can get lucky with your boxes and have the first one you search be the one that frees you from your contraption, but you could run a gauntlet of searching 4 whole boxes for 12 seconds each before getting that thing off. It's a second objective, and a massively important and time-consuming one at that. A good thing to mention about this though, survivors can search through boxes even if their trap isn't active yet, which can put a wrench in things. But actually no, it doesn't. You see, the dangerous part of the boxes isn't just the fact that they have the capacity to waste a survivor's time, it's the fact that when you are doing them as a survivor, you are going to be sitting in one place making a ton of distinct noise for 12 seconds. This makes you a prime target for the pig to crouch on over and jump scare you for a free hit if you aren't paying attention. And if she scares you off a box when it isn't done, it's wasted effort and the trap is still on you. This is so fucking dastardly, I adore it. When you play pig, you are basically giving people side quests the whole game. And not only that, side quests that only benefit you. Either a survivor wastes their time that they could be using to do objectives, becomes a sitting duck for an ambush, or dies. Granted, having a reverse bear trap doesn't completely stop survivors from doing other stuff. If a survivor wishes to test their luck, they can do generators, heal folks, slap hex totems, open chests, all that good stuff. But every moment that they spend doing other things is a moment they risk a generator going off and turning on their trap. Or worse, their already activated trap reaching a point of no return. Worth mentioning though, unless you get super lucky, you won't be killing people every game with reverse bear traps. In fact, you should definitely still be hooking trapped people to death rather than just leaving them be. Like, don't skimp on your main way to get people out of the game just because you can put a secondary pressure on them. Also, if the last generator is complete, you can't activate any more bear traps after that. Dormant bear traps basically become fancy cosmetics for survivors. But that said, if a survivor has an active trap by endgame, an extra wrinkle introduces itself. You see, you might think that the best option for a trapped survivor at this point would be to rush exit gates, get out, and not even worry about the boxes. Well, about that. If a survivor has an active trap on and decides to leave, they will find their trap starting to beep faster and faster. This is a warning, because if they try to walk even halfway through the exit zone with an active trap, they will die instantly. This means that, for survivors, the endgame becomes a mad dash to get your active trap off. This can fuck you up in several ways. If you have a coordinated team, it means having to prolong your time in the game to make sure everyone's death hats are off. In fact, it's the only time I can in good conscience suggest 99ing gates. But if you and your team aren't coordinated, you might have to deal with endgame collapse at the same time, meaning that you have to get that shit off while a separate timer is running. One that might be shorter than the amount of time that you would have had to stay alive. If it isn't obvious yet, I adore the pig. Pig is great because on top of having a unique role as ambush-based stealth killer, she's great at creating completely unique situations for smart survivors to deal with. Like, okay, let's think about this for a second. The most quotable thing from the Saw movies is make your choice.
Live or die. Make your choice.
Which in the movies tends to imply that in the coming trial, you must either make a sacrifice or perish. In many cases, it's a choice between another person's safety and your own. This is pretty smartly reflected in the pig in the way that traps are activated. Are you as a team going to stall the main objective until all the traps are dealt with? Making sure people aren't running a death timer but forcing you to be in the match and vulnerable for longer? Or are you going to complete the generator, furthering the main objective and getting yourself closer to freedom while someone's reverse bear trap turns on from your actions? That fucking rules. This character fucking rules, sincerely. It's interesting. I wouldn't call myself a pig main by total choice, but from how much I have played her, she might as well be one of my mains. She sort of became a secret focus of mine, mostly because she offers a chance to put pressure on folks with new and bombastic tools. I am a big fan of ambushing folks. It feels so good to get my virtual insanity slides in and smack someone, but the main fun I have is putting a reverse bear trap on someone and imagining them going, ah, shit. I'm not the type to extend the game on most killers. I usually only take a couple gen regression perks at most, but with Pig, a character whose whole thing is basically passive slowdown, I'm allowed to be extremely wacky with my builds. I don't have to make generators that much slower if I am secretly hoping that everyone completes them. Every complete generator is potentially another trap activated if I can be careful with how I use them. This allows me to go for stuff like really aggressive chase builds, insane levels of aura reading, hex-only insano builds built to waste survivors' time even more. And once I'm out of traps, and can't slow people down anymore, well, the ambush is still pretty good. Even after the anxiety machines are all used up, I am still a stealth killer by the end of the day, and I can make great use of that. Most of Pig's power is in her traps, though. The ability to just slam a new problem in front of survivors with very little risk on your part is just so fun. It's a much cooler way to have an instant death power than Myers has. It's not going to happen every game, and is much more like a treat for if all things go exactly correctly. It makes me feel like I am actually giving people ultimatums mid-game. Some of my favorite matches as Pig are the ones where a really smart group tries to 99 a ton of generators while trying to help a friend with their bear trap. No other killer can impose that much of a behavior change among survivors on its own. Like, you play different against every killer, of course, but with Pig, you enable a whole different level of problem causing. I also think a big part of it is that her add-ons are super fun to use. Not all of them are extremely transformative, but they all add wrinkles in one way or another. Before we talk about those though, let's take a moment to focus on Pig's perks. Two of which are some of my favorites, and one of which genuinely surprised me.
Touch! Don't touch.
Surveillance is one of the most flexible and interesting generator-affecting perks in the entire game. It seems simple until you really dig into its possibilities. First of all, it extends the range of sounds made by survivors doing repairs by 8 meters. That's pretty sizable. For stealth killers, this means you can hear where people are and play in a flank, and otherwise it's just good for knowing where someone is. But that isn't the only reason you use this. The main course of this perk is that after a generator is damaged, the usual red aura it has becomes white. And the moment the generator is touched by a survivor long enough to start fixing it, its aura becomes a bright yellow for 16 seconds. This won't ping you when it's happening. You just kinda have to be diligent and understand when to look around. But it is a total workhorse of generator patrol. You don't have to guess where people are. You can just go to the glowing generator and people are bound to be at least nearby when you show up. This also completely trumps aura suppression builds too, since it's not the survivor being highlighted, it's the generator itself. Basically, if you have this perk and routinely smack generators, you can use surveillance to always come back to the scene of the crime at just the right moment. But even that isn't what makes this perk so great, at least in my opinion. You see, the aura shifting aspect of this perk doesn't just happen when you kick a generator. It happens if a generator starts regressing for any reason. So if you were to say, bring Surge with you, it would cause all generators with progress around you to blow up as usual, but it would also tell you if any of those gens got worked on in the future. Or let's say you bring Ruin with you. That would mean that any generator that a survivor stops fixing for any reason would be subject to surveillance aura shifting as well. Or what about oppression? Failed skill checks count, and when a survivor messes up, it's gonna show up across the map and let you know what generators are being affected. Hell, even if they aren't being actively repaired, they turn into aura-reading traps. The sheer potential for synergy is nuts. Even just taking this with pain res can be enough to throw a serious wrench into the security of survivors. When I am taking a generator regression perk, and it makes sense, I tend to also bring surveillance. It is just so much important information to have at a moment's notice. Only problem being that if you have any other perk that turns generators yellow, which there are a surprising amount, it might confuse you if you aren't keeping total track of stuff. They really should differentiate the colors of auras at some point. Also, if a generator reaches 0, it stops regressing and that means this perk stops affecting it for the time being. But like, that generator's at 0 now. I don't think you'll have to worry about it for a long time.
I'll make my choice.
Make Your Choice is a deliciously themed perk that also acts as a pretty dangerous countermeasure against altruistic survivors. The way it works is that if a survivor unhooks someone and you are further than 32 meters away, the survivor that did the unhooking screams, revealing their aura to you, and becomes exposed for a whole minute. A whole minute. Jeez, I forgot how good this perk was. After this happens, it goes on a 60-second cooldown, so no more than one person can be exposed by it at a given time. But this is still really powerful. Like, of course, if you return to the hook, you will be able to focus on the one who did the unhooking and smack him for an insta-down. But you don't always have to be on top of it either. Even if you spend 30 of those seconds doing other stuff, there is absolutely a chance that the other 30 is going to be spent in a chase with an exposed survivor. All things considered, it's best to capitalize on this when it happens. But sometimes if you try to focus down the survivor who is affected with Make Your Choice, you might just end up wasting your time and running the timer, leading to a normal hit when exposed eventually wears off. You gotta be smart. This is a far from brainless perk. If you aren't returning to your hooks all the time, this is going to be less than useful. But if you are that sort, it is quite a scary perk to carry around with you. As an aside, I also like the game of listening to a character scream and guessing who it might have been before you get there. Because if you get it right, you might be able to make a much smarter decision on who to basic attack.
Touch! Don't touch!
I am going to be real with you. I almost never used Hangman's Trick before I started recording for this video. And after a few rounds, I am kind of deeply in love with it. First of all, this is a Scourge Hook perk, and a weird one to start with as far as explaining what that entails. Basically, when you pick any Scourge Hook perk, the game picks 4 random hooks in the trial and makes them special white glowy ones that interact with said perk. Most of them tend to deal in hooking and unhooking. But this one is different. This Scourge Hook perk comes with a passive buff, in that when a survivor starts sabotaging a hook, any hook, you get a loud noise notification at said hook's location. This is a super narrow upside because not every survivor is going to have the ability to sabotage a hook. Or heck, even if they do, they may not always be in the right time and place to do so anyway. Though when this does go off, it does help you know where to start heading if someone tries to be preemptive with a sabotage. Wherever that shit ain't happening. The second aspect of this perk is what I adore it for, which is that when you are carrying someone, all survivors within 12 meters of a Scourge Hook will have their aura revealed to you. That sounds just okay, yeah? 12 meters is a fine amount, but you can't choose which hooks are Scourge Hooks. So the utility is based on luck. That can't be good. Well, trust me when I say I thought the exact same thing. But the moment I actually started using Hangman's Trick, I was shocked at just how many people I found with it. Getting it down and just instantly understanding where people are in key areas while lugging a survivor around, it can be really nice. Sometimes a Scourge Hook is near a generator and you see a few folks chipping away at it. Sometimes survivors just got done with an unhook near a Scourge Hook and you can find out if they're still there trying to heal up. Sometimes a survivor is hiding nearby to sabotage a Scourge Hook and you can see them running up to do so long before the loud noise indicator even happens. Sometimes the Scourge Hook is just somewhere survivors like to be and reveals the aura of even people on separate floors to where it is. This is all sometimes, though. There are moments where the glowy hooks are just in bad spots. But sincerely, at least one Scourge Hook is going to be in a good spot per game. Maybe not the perfect spot, but just the right spot to give you an idea of where people are. I am so Hangman's Trick pilled that I consider it a worthy side grade to BBQ and Chili. It's just nice to have, especially with builds that use other "this object is now a beacon for aura reading" perks. It's really fun to mess with. Also, it is unique in that it's built to supplement Scourge Hooks rather than acting on its own. but that hasn't stopped me from trying. Oh, one last thing. In a recent update, there was a perk added called Jagged Compass, and it synergizes with Hangman's in such a unique way that I have been unable to stop using this combo for a few days now. I might have a problem. Who knew taking luck out of the equation of a Scourge Hook build could be so powerful? Alright, now for the add-ons, which I gotta say are some of my favorites in the game. Some interact with ambush, some interact with your traps, some flip the game on its head even more than you can usually do base kit, but generally I just find myself adoring them. Also helps that the theming of them can get pretty gnarly and visceral too. It's like you're tinkering with your reverse bear trap to make them even more of a bad time.
It's a combat zone.
These straps make the act of going from standing to crouching faster, but not the act of going from crouching to standing, because that would make basic attacks way too free. It's a simple one, and one that just saves a sliver of time when you're deciding to get low outside of a chase. But where I think this actually works best is in the middle of a chase, where you can make your undetectable even more on demand and make survivors do some really silly stuff. Even without that in mind, it's also just a wonderful way to get into sneak mode quicker. Super simple and not the craziest thing in the world, but it'll probably make a difference in your time management.
Oh, that's smart.
Interlocking Razor is a reference to the silliest part of the second movie where someone doesn't understand basic physics and dies. It also causes failed jigsaw boxes to cause deep wound on injured survivors. Now, full stop, I'm gonna come clean. This was hell to get working. Like, the chances of someone being currently injured and missing a skill check when working on a box are slimmer than slim. But in my opinion, the boon it gives is kind of worth it on the off chance it goes off. Like, don't get me wrong, if you want to use this, you need a build made to force it to happen. But all it can take is creeping up on someone trying to complete a box and praying you interrupt a skill check and then boom, deep wound. Now, deep wound is not the most horrible thing in the world to deal with, and if you scare someone off a box to inflict it, you're already freezing the timer on both the deep wound and the trap until the chase ends. But that's the thing, you can just peel off of a chase to make both of those things resume at some point. And if someone is unlucky, this could be a death sentence. 12 seconds to deal with a deep wound before you can make the trek to a new box means 12 seconds off of that their timer. And if you panic and choose not to deal with it, well, that's gonna be a major issue in one way or another. Yeah, that won't happen the majority of the time, but it does lead to some pretty crazy situations, like, watch this. Yeah, that's completely bonkers. Don't plan on this add-on working 100% of the time or even 50% of the time, but it is very funny when it does find a time to occur.
Cancer.
John's med file makes you faster when crouched. Like, you move basically the same speed as if you were standing up. This reminds me of an add-on for Ghostface that I enjoy, and it has basically the same use, giving you permission to crouch around effectively unimpeded. If you want to stay undetectable for a long time like I do, this is pretty amazing for that. And honestly, even if you don't, it can mean coming around a corner in stealth mode to just stand up way quicker. Not only that, but it means you can stay low and chase and still tail people somewhat effectively, which is hilarious and terrifying.
Miss.
Broken Syringe turns the already pretty forgiving cooldown for missing an ambush dash into an even less punishing stumble. If you sincerely fuck up in a loop, sometimes you end up in a place that makes the cooldown way worse. So if you use this thing, you can get back to chasing earlier. My favorite way to use this though is to end charges near people and go straight to swinging. It's not foolproof, but like, 10% off of a 1.5 second cooldown is deceptively good. All things said though, Workshop Grease is just a straight upgrade from Broken Syringe, and becomes a very lovely tool for aggressive pigs. It both makes missing less of an issue, and makes your charge time much faster. In a lot of ways, I do wish add-ons wouldn't eat each other's lunches, but I think the ability to combine Grease and Syringe to make cooldown even faster is pretty nice. The meat of Grease is the charge increase though, allowing you to go from roaring to rushing in record time. The rush already helps catch up to people trying to get away, so this makes the reaction time asked of survivors a bit more brutal. It also makes mid-chase ambushing very quick and reliable, making charging up at the usual loops you can dominate already even faster than normal. Basically, this is an add-on for if you want to be sprinting often and get back into chases afterward just as often.
Somebody stop me!
Alright, so this is the first in a long list of add-ons that add fucked up passive nonsense to your reverse bear traps, and they're all very fun and evil. This one, for instance, will make it so that for as long as the survivor has a trap on, they can't see auras. Like, they get the blindness status until they get their hat off. Long-term blindness is pretty fucked in general, but for Pig, it's a lot more of a passive nuisance than a huge problem. As far as hiding yourself, you are already someone who has undetectable on command, so you can make yourself immune to aura reading on a dime, but this still helps in ways you might not expect. For one, the times where you aren't in sneaky mode are going to be a little harder for survivors to detect, which is nice. But the real point of long-term aura reading is that it makes basically every important thing in the game harder to find. Hooked survivors, generators, items on the ground. Long-term blindness makes finding that stuff such a chore, least as long as the survivor is stuck with a hat of shame. This doesn't, however, remove the survivor's ability to see the auras of jigsaw boxes, given it's a key killer object and all that. So when you take this, you gotta keep in mind that survivors are going to be a lot more focused on getting the hat off than they might have been before. If you're okay with that and just want to use it to get more idle people on boxes, this still works. But if you aren't being that active, I would say definitely consider other options. This is a surprisingly aggressive add-on.
Here I come. Here I come.
Last Will is a fun trade-off. You have to charge up your ambush for a considerably longer time, but when you finally get dashing, you do so quite a bit faster. Like, the feeling I get when using this is comparable to using the engravings as Bubba. It just feels supernaturally fast compared to what I am used to concerning the Pig. You give survivors a bit more time to run due to the charge time increase, but you also catch up to those survivors way easier despite that. Due to the speed increase, you also go much further per charge, meaning that you can start ambushing from farther away in some cases and still hit folks. But the extra speed allows you to snap even the most problem-solving loops in the game over your knee like sugar glass. Definitely don't go for this if you don't have a feel for the normal mechanics of dashing around, but when you have that down, this is a fantastic side grade upgrade thingamagrade.
What's in the box?
Pain.
Razor Wires is the distant, slightly more consistent cousin to Interlocking Razor. Basically, it makes the Jigsaw box skill check itself a tad harder to deal with, which can be nice. And when a survivor is healthy when they miss a skill check on one, they become flat out injured. If it works, it's free damage. A free health state against a survivor who fucks up or is interrupted at the wrong time is pretty gnarly, but you gotta treat it as a possibility rather than a foregone conclusion. You could combine both Razor objects to make Jigsaw box skill checks into high-stakes pain boxes, no matter how healthy survivor is, but that is such a huge risk. I don't know, I don't want to say this is bad. I have gotten at least a few satisfying plays out of it, and a survivor having to heal the full after a lost skill check is very nice. I would just be smarter about how you use it is all. Ooh, God, I both hate and love how visceral the modifications to the reverse bear trap can be in description. These utility razors cause survivors who you injure while they have a trap on them to become inflicted with hemorrhage. On Pig, hemorrhage can be nice for a few reasons. For one, it can make tracking people and chase easier, mostly due to being able to stealth at any time and follow splotchy blood trails super easily. But since you are a character who is going to be leaving injured people and refinding them a lot, it means you have plenty of opportunities to interrupt healing and cause seconds spent patching up to wash away. This is especially rough given that survivors going for healing during trap time are making a pretty conscious decision between their timers and becoming healthy. I would warn though that a sizable chunk of survivors just focus on getting rid of their trap instead of healing, but that ain't a sure thing at all. Go ahead and use this if you find yourself interrupting healing a ton regardless.
That is bullshit!
Right, so, the gears. These things are completely evil. Being able to set traps on survivors quicker is nice. It's not essential, but it can save a bit of time and might let you chase away a nearby flashbang survivor mere moments after putting a hat on someone. But let's be real. That's not the reason you use the gears. For every gear add-on, Jigsaw boxes take a chunk longer to search. You wouldn't expect it, but this is the add-on that makes people die to traps the most. It isn't the most insane amount of time to waste on a box if you, say, find the first one by luck. But if you keep having to search boxes, you are going to run your timer down harder and harder until you are down to the wire. By the time you are searching your 4th box, you could be seconds away from your head popping. And that doesn't even factor in that the longer search time gives the pig a much longer window to circle back on a jigsaw box and find some poor sap trying to get their trap off. If you play your cards right, taking the gears, having a really time-consuming hex build or otherwise, all that stuff, you can, with enough luck, get someone dead by bear trap at least once a game. Like everything in this game, that is not a guarantee. But sincerely, this can be so brutal that it causes people to combust without you even checking in on them. I would say these are my favorite add-ons for Pig. They are mean as hell, but I get such a dopamine hit from knowing someone did not handle their side quest in time. The annotated plan is a very interesting proposition. You get an extra reverse bear trap. Just flat out, you have access to an extra heart attack machine. Pretty fucking good, and generally means that you will most likely have at least one survivor running around and panicking at endgame, with a ticking time bomb strapped to their head. That said, it increases the timer by 10 seconds, which is pretty raw. But to offset this, there's a special catch, in that every generator that gets complete while the bear trap is active will cause the trap to lose 10 seconds the instant that occurs. It straight up just deducts it from the total seconds left till self-destruction. This is kinda weird to use because if a survivor is on a hook, it won't actually do its thing. But aside from that edge case, it's a pretty fun shakeup to try out. You probably aren't gonna pop heads with it alone. What it's more for is dealing with that usual issue where a generator goes off and there aren't any inactive traps to turn on. It's sort of a waste of your 5 chances to proc your trap cards. So this kinda softens the blow with a little consolation anxiety spike for all trapped survivors.
Serious crime, Griff. It's fuck. Ugh.
Alright, so usually the moment that a survivor gets a trap on them, they can see the aura of jigsaw boxes anywhere on the map, meaning they can get straight to work on their side quest. Rule set number 2 makes it so that survivors have to wait until their trap is active to see the boxes through walls. They can try to find them without aura reading, but it's going to be a little bit very annoying. So this can do a couple things for you. It can either create moments of complacency for survivors until their traps turn on, or make survivors waste a lot more time trying to find boxes without any help. It's hard to know when this is making a big difference, but even if a trap isn't counting down, it can make a lot of other add-ons have more chances to factor in, like utility razors and mask. Overall, very messed up, and also kind of funny in concept. Like, nah, fuck you, you don't get to see contraptions today. Rusty attachments makes reverse bear traps cause mangled for 70 seconds. Like, even after a survivor gets it off of them, they have to deal with mangled until its timer is up. This makes people who get off their trap early waste a lot more time healing after the fact, and makes people who usually heal through their bear trap think twice. Finding injured people with a bear trap on is already very nice, so making sure people are more tempted to stay injured from a trap in play means a lot more of those moments and a lot more opportunities to find injured people at boxes. Oh baby, this is the ticket to turn my brain off. Inflicting exhausted is already a bit of a sigh of relief, at least for me. It means I just flat out don't have to worry about some of the most chase extending and killer time wasting perks in the entire game. So making it the case that your traps inflict exhausted for the entire duration of them being on gives them a ton of utility. On top of the prospect of wasting time and possibility of death, survivors with traps on will also become way more predictable for the killer. Regardless of if a survivor has a powerful perk that exhausts them or not, if I see a survivor with a trap on while I'm using this add-on, I will be reassured that the chase I'm about to get in will absolutely not become an artificial marathon. This is basically made for finding one specific survivor over and over to cause them pain, but it also just acts as a fantastic way to keep track of who in a chase physically cannot fuck you up with a dead heart or a leave. Live? It's live.
First, I have to put away my secret box.
Amanda's secret makes survivors vulnerable right as they get their traps off, causing a loud noise indicator when they escape it and revealing their aura for 6 seconds. This is great if you like using more than one trap on a survivor. Like, great job getting that shit off. Have another. But even if you don't do that, this is fantastic info to have, and can lead you to getting into a good straightforward chase or sometimes getting an easy hit from crouching into an ambush. This can be extended with Lethal Pursuer to make you even more of an aura reading juggernaut. I tend to be already in chases a lot when this thing procs, so I don't personally tend to get a lot of use out of it, but it is a fantastic bookkeeping tool if you are really invested in knowing what folks are up to.
Do I have to follow you all day?
Jigsaw Sketch is another add-on that just straight up gives you an extra bear trap, which is bonkers because this one has no downside, and is double bonkers because if you both use this and Annotated Plan, you get 6 goddamn death hats to play with. An embarrassment of riches, I would say, allowing you to double trap at least 1 or 2 survivors per round. The added bonus of this one is that it makes all generators being repaired by survivors turn yellow in aura, which isn't always a huge deal, but can be a dead giveaway to some of the most vulnerable survivors. I can't think of why you would work on generators if you have a trap on, but it totally happens, and it leads to them being caught with their pants down more often than not. That said though, the big upside of this is just having an extra trap to play with. More leeway is very, very nice to have. And SFWs counting how many traps you've used are gonna have a total breakdown when you just plonk a 5th one down after your 4th. Tampered timer sounds simple, but is actually a pretty big decision. Using it shaves 20 whole seconds off of the timers for your traps, so survivors will only have 2 minutes 10 seconds to free themselves. On one hand, this makes the possibility of lethality way higher. On the other, you kinda gotta not sit idly if you want it to work the way you want. If the gears are best at passively wasting the time of survivors, a tampered timer is best if you are actively rotating through jigsaw boxes to find someone. Less time to dilly-dally means more survivors trying to focus on finding their key, and also means that interrupting someone trying to get their trap off means they're even closer to dying when you do so. This mixed with gears can be completely and utterly insane. Like, against the Geneva Convention in spirit, let's say.
So then I went creepy-crawly over the sand dunes.
So Amanda's letter is about giving up a bit of lethality to increase your lethality. Let me explain. Slapping this thing on means you only have 2 reverse bear traps to use the whole trial, which is kinda terrible. Like, even if you take another add-on to give you 3 traps, you're still gonna be unable to cover the whole team in passive slowdown. In return, you get an absolutely asinine amount of aura reading. If you are crouched at all, you see survivors within 16 meters. To give you an idea on how crazy that is, the all-seeing blood on Wraith is bonkers level good, and that is only 8 meters of aura reading. Crouching for even a little bit can give you so much information, and because you are crouched, people will probably not know where you are at all, but you will know where they are. Right down to if they are doing a generator, stuck on a box, or picking their nose. This is such a wonderful way to both open up your build to non-aura reading perks, and to make your jump scares all the more consistent. I enjoy the reverse bear traps a bit too much to use this thing that regularly, but as a person who thinks that ambush and crouch is genuinely good already, this turns an already fantastic on-demand undetectable into a completely busted player finding tool.
You will not survive after 30 seconds. Oh, fucking god damn it! That was the one, too! That was the one! That was the fucking—
Videotape is hilarious. Basically, this causes survivors to start the trial with a bear trap already stamped to their head. No need to chase them around, they just get trapped right out the starting gate. These are not just traps from the ether though. Taking videotape with you will basically gather all the traps you have when starting a trial and put them on survivors right away. Meaning if you brought an add-on that gives you 1 extra, you would have 1 left over, and if you brought Amanda's letter, only 2 survivors would be trapped at the start, and you would have none left. In one sense, this sort of blows your load early if you don't know what you're doing, but if you do understand how to use this thing, it can be one of the most interesting game changers a pig can employ. For one, it creates this sense of unease, like, damn, everyone has traps on. Are we sure we want to work on generators right now? Don't we want to get these things off first? It has the capacity to give all survivors cold feet. But if they adhere to caution too long, well, that's so much time passing without a generator being done. So it's a win-win. Either the survivors wait for an absurdly long time to even start touching a generator, or survivors start up their timers simultaneously. That's not the only wrinkle to it, though. This can make a lot of other add-ons become even more interesting. Rules number 2 makes the mad dash survivors have to make at the start of the game much more of a directionless hassle. The status effect inflicting add-ons get applied instantly and stay present for as long as survivors let it. In particular, the venom, the mask, and the utility blades become dastardly. Annotated plan allows for early game generators to shave off more and more time from people's traps. Jigsaw's sketch shows you which generators are being touched really early in the game. Timer and gears makes the starting gate hell even more hell. There are so many possibilities with this one singular add-on. I think my favorite thing to bring with me is still just an extra hat by either of the add-ons that give you one. There is nothing funnier than finding the one survivor who found their key early and retrapping them as soon as possible. People routinely underestimate the pig, but people also tend to love the pig. Honestly, out of most of the licensed killers, I think that she's one of the most generally accepted ones next to, like, Ghostface, in terms of how many people I see maining her for the aesthetics alone. Which, all things considered, is wild, because she plays weird. I am so happy that people tend to like her, or completely adore her like I do. But I will always maintain that this is a very strange character to get so popular. She came out in a time of brand name fatigue, as a tie-in to a torture gore porno series that has a sizable but narrow audience it shoots for, while releasing super duper weak, and people grew to really enjoy her. It warms my heart, damn it. She's an odd duck, but she's an odd duck that has become a big part of the game's culture. And as much as I am happy that in the next video I will be able to talk about an original killer rather than a licensed one, I want to say that good licensed killer chapters like this one give me life. It rules that pig somehow rules. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.